Esther, I also want to get your thoughts on what's been revealed today, that the BBC doctored Donald Trump's January 6th speech to make it appear as though he was encouraging his supporters to riot in the Capitol. Now, a leaked 19-page dossier, which was shared with The Telegraph by a whistleblower, revealed that a Panorama program broadcast a week before the election last year completely misled viewers by mangling footage. Look at this.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So Panorama, which broadcast its Trump a Second Chance program on October 28 last year, also showed flag-waving men marching on the Capitol directly after Donald Trump spoke. And the dossier found that by mangling footage from the start of Trump's speech with a segment from nearly an hour later, Panorama had made Trump say things he never actually said to make it appear as though he was encouraging riots. Now, this has led to the resignation of one controller at BBC. Donald Trump Jr. has posted about this, blasting the BBC, calling it fake news, saying that the fake news reporters in the UK are just as dishonest as the ones here in America. Esther, it's absolutely shocking, but it doesn't surprise me. Can I get your reaction?
It doesn't surprise me at all. And as we speak, in the next few weeks, I'm going to have another quarterly payment come out of my bank account for the BBC license fee, which I am obligated to pay, unfortunately. But this is the stuff of basically, this is the kind of stuff that has basically tanked the BBC's reputation. Now, the fact that this dossier, this 19-page dossier, was actually made known to the BBC's own ethics and standards watchdog, which is comprised of Tim Davie, who basically runs the BBC, and yet nothing was done about it. It just goes to show the level of institutional rots that we're looking at and the culture of bias that has been allowed to take root in the BBC. Now, if you know anything about how the BBC functions, and if you know more broadly about journalism in the UK, you know the kinds of people that can afford to even get a BBC internship tend to be from kind of plush neighborhoods, from very good schools in and around London. They and their families tend to have a certain political ilk or leaning. And this kind of ideology, this kind of cushy luxury belief class of the left-wing metropolitan elite has basically filtered its way through the BBC ranks, so much so that if you talk to people that do BBC shows in the UK, panel shows, debate shows and all of that, and when they get a call from a producer basically asking them their thoughts on the topic, you probably come away knowing the thoughts of the producer as well, and is probably not going to be agreeing with you if it in any way leans away from the anti-Brexit, anti-Farage, anti-conservative point of view. So this is unsurprising. I mean, we've seen so many gaffes from the BBC over the years. The fact that they refuse to call Hamas a terrorist group, even though they are a designated terrorist group in the UK by the British government, which is just completely astonishing. The documentary that BBC Panorama did about how to survive a war zone in Gaza, when they found out that the narrator was a Hamas official's son. All these sorts of things that have come out from the BBC that have been poorly handled. You know, the Hugh Edwards scandal, which was probably one of the most disgraceful things that's happened to the BBC. The fact that they let this man who was soliciting child pornography just keep his job at the BBC, and in obvious fashion with the rest of our judicial system, he basically got a slap on the wrist and a few months of a suspended sentence, which is just disgusting. But these are the kinds of things that have been coming out of the BBC that doesn't surprise anyone. I suspect there's going to be a bit of panic in Westminster because the BBC's Royal Charter is up in 2027. And we know that Lisa Nandy, the minister who heads up these sorts of affairs, has said that nothing is off the table. You have people that are seeing their license fees go up and are wondering, why am I paying this? I don't even watch the BBC. Their own watchdog can't even keep them in check. The fact that this was submitted to their own watchdog and nothing happened, and this was allowed to circulate, it's vile. And in the case of this Donald Trump video, I mean, the fact that it was completely misleading is linked to the fact that he wasn't even facing federal charges for actually inciting violence, because it clearly wasn't true. They took a clip that was two clips 15 minutes apart in this man's speech and tried to make it look like he directly incited violence on January the 6th, which doesn't really get much lower than that, if you ask me.
No, it certainly doesn't. The TDS is just on another level. Now, I want to turn to this horrific incident that occurred in the UK over the weekend with this mass stabbing on a train. British prosecutors have now charged a 32-year-old man with 10 counts of attempted murder after this mass stabbing on a train bound for London that left multiple passengers injured. Now, Anthony Williams has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and other charges. But also, Esther, a train driver is being hailed a hero after he helped save passengers during this knife attack. Andrew Johnson, he's a Royal Navy and Iraq War veteran. What more can you tell us?
Yes, this man, the footage has been released of his complete act of heroism, and how he ushered people off the train, and how his quick thinking allowed the train to be diverted to a station that allowed armed British police to get on board and tackle this man. I mean, the story is harrowing and not surprising, but really quite horrifying in the sense that it feels like nothing and nowhere is safe in the UK anymore. This particular train, to my horror, is a train that I've taken for 15 years. It's the direct train line that goes to where I live in the UK. And so, it's one of those things that makes you think, where is safe? And unfortunately, what I've noticed is this is now becoming a pattern. So many people might not be familiar with this, but back in 2023, there was a man, a black British male by the name of Valdo Calacane, who went on a stabbing spree in Nottingham and killed 3 people, including 2 university students, because the voices in his head were telling him to. Now, this was in the aftermath of the fact that he went down to London in the weeks prior to MI5, and it was literally standing outside the building begging them to arrest him because, again, the voices in his head were telling him to. And then you fast forward to last year, you'll probably remember the summer riots in Southport here in the UK, which were triggered by the fact that what the police misled us by saying it was a Welsh choir boy, which ended up actually being Axel Rudakabana, a black British national of Ugandan heritage. He went on to stab and kill 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport, even though he was known to the authorities. He had a history of mental health issues and severe antisocial behavior. Social workers couldn't even go to this young man's house without a police escort. Wow. And yet that was allowed to happen. And now we're seeing this man as well, Anthony Williams, who's another black British male who got on a train and stabbed 10 people. Thankfully, no one has died. But what we're seeing here is a trend of individuals that are slipping through the cracks. Now, we obviously have a knife crime epidemic in the UK, but what we're also seeing is public health officials that don't really want to tailor public health policy towards a particular demographic that has a higher incidence rate of these kinds of mental illnesses. Most people don't know that in the UK, black young males are 6 to 9 times more likely to suffer from schizophrenia than the general population. Now, when you look at this group that makes up only 2% of the British population, that's actually quite significant. And you have to have public health policies that's open about this, but also tailors the treatment towards it. So these people that are presenting a higher risk of these kinds of incidents and psychosis are dealt with. This coupled with the increasing use of cannabis, which we know can induce psychotic episodes, and you have a perfect recipe for disaster. So it's kind of coupled with the fact that the British state just doesn't have the resources to protect the British public anymore, that we know, and also public health officials are failing the public by not tailoring our healthcare towards reducing this level of threat by targeting these groups that pose a higher level of threat with this regard, which is completely baffling to me, to be honest.
And people are getting injured. No, it's horrific to watch. Finally, Esther, last time we spoke about the polls in the UK, where, of course, reform is well ahead. Over in France now, Macron's approval rating has dropped to a historic low of, wait for it, 11%, making him the most unpopular French president in 70 years. Wow. Talk to us about this.
Well, most people would say that he's a 2-term president, so it's kind of the natural ebbs and flows of political opinion. But Macron has achieved something that even his predecessor, François Hollande, didn't manage to, which is, even though they were both polled at around 11%, the actual personal animosity towards his person is much higher than Hollande. People don't just disagree with Macron's policies or his work as a president. They dislike him deeply as a person. And contrary to popular belief, this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that there is this campaign trying to establish that his wife is indeed a man, which she is not. He's just a deeply unpopular president because well, one of the most recent reasons is because of the snap election he called last year, which has basically left France rudderless, without leadership and without a budget. And in many Frenchmen opinion, this has made France a laughing stock. You know, the country is completely gridlocked. Nothing is happening. I mean, the only silver lining that Macron can say is that at least his popularity ratings, while still not great, are not as bad as Keir Starmer's, who's hovering somewhere around, wait for it, -40.
Wow, it doesn't get much worse than that. Esther Krakue, thank you so much for your time. Great to speak with you.
Thank you.